Hello, and welcome to the Metaphysical Life podcast, where we talk about all things relating to the body, mind, and spirit. I am your host, Nicole Kaye. And today's guest is Ronnie Barton. And thank you, Ronnie, for being here. I wanted Ronnie to come on because we follow each other on Instagram, and I listen to his stories, and I really believe he has a beautiful story to share. And I wanted him to come on to kind of share, what his life was before he had a spiritual awakening, and then share a little bit about what his life is today. So welcome, Ronnie, and so share your story. Let us know what your journey has been up until this point.
Thank you. Okay, sounds good. I'm excited to share. So for me, before my spiritual awakening, I guess I was obviously asleep to myself and the decisions I was making and things like that. So I don't know, I guess I could use the word typical. I would had a lot of hobbies, a lot of things like that, worked a lot, and also had an identity based on ego. And a lot of different hobbies, a lot of different escapes from myself, I know now. Boats, just trucks, vehicles, things like that, a bunch of different things. And I'd kind of bury myself in them to not confront or things that were going on inside me. I've always been an emotional person as well, so I kind of hid from that. And I wasn't good at communicating or expressing my emotions or feelings with other people. And that came from me, not being able to express them with myself inside. So I lived life like that for a long time. I had, when I was in, I guess, starting high school, I was diagnosed with panic and anxiety disorder and was put on medication, I think at the end of me being 16 years old for that. And it never really subsided. It never, honestly, I don't think the medication ever really made it better, other than maybe a placebo type effect in my mind that, hey, I'm on medication and I feel better. But as soon as the newness of that wore off, it kind of go right back to where it was. So I battled that through the end of my teens. I ended up dropping out of school because I would have panic attacks at school and kind of freak out and leave and come home and try to figure out why I felt like I was dying every day. And so I dealt with that from then through my 20s and into my early 30s, where eventually it started turning into a physical sickness. And I'd wake up in the mornings very, very sick. I was diagnosed with something that's called CVSA, which is cyclic vomiting syndrome. And it took them a couple years to actually diagnose me. But what it is most times people wake up in the morning sick, vomiting. And it's psyche related. And it's like clockwork. Like about the time you get up for work in the morning, you wake up very, very, very strong feeling of panic and anxiety to the point of feeling physically sick. And then at that point, the mind kind of takes over and fear takes over and you go into sickness and it's just a mess. And then for me, there are different time frames that last for people. For me, it'd be 24 hours like clockwork. Most times I was admitted into the hospital because I'd be so dehydrated you also sweat really bad. And like I said, it took about 2 years to be diagnosed. And finally, I was diagnosed by one of the doctors in there running a bunch of tests and told me what it was. And then I went, after being diagnosed and being sick for a couple of years, and for me, my perception of it was me being afraid of my life these multiple times. I went and sat in front of my psychiatrist office, which was the last time I saw him, actually. And he said, "Mr. Barton, I'm sorry, but what you have, there's no cure for. It's psyche related, and it's driven by your panic and anxiety and the things that you've fought since you were a teenager." And he told me that there's nothing they can do. They can change my medicine or up the dosage of my medication and try different things to get the side effects of the effects of my illness to subside. And at that point, I told him, "Okay, we'll figure it out. Thank you." And I never saw him again. That was the last time I went in there. And I had seen the same psychiatrist since I was 17. And I want to say I was 33 the last time I saw my psychiatrist. And I went home and started learning psychology is what I did, because I couldn't accept that I had to live with something like this for the rest of my life. Like it was putting a stop to everything I was doing. I didn't have health insurance at the time. So basically my credit and stuff was ruined from being admitted in the hospital so many times. So I started looking into psychology and learning myself and my personality and my mind and things like that. I had no idea about consciousness or being awoken or spirituality or anything at this point. And one of the first things I actually did was I microdosed psilocybin, because I researched it and found out that I believe it was in the 60s or 70s. It was used in psychology to help people kind of retrain their thought patterns and get rid of fear and things like that. And it worked well. So I did that, and it did work well for me. So I did that one time, and then I kept researching, psychology, and psychology eventually led into my consciousness and my thought patterns and the rooted things that feed psychological conditions, which was my panic and anxiety. So as I started learning that, I started to heal myself because I realized what was going on at root. At the same time, I changed my diet then to vegetarian. And I want to say I weighed like 260 pounds. Now I weigh like 205 or something like that. So I lost a lot of weight, changed what I was putting into my body, because I learned, obviously, that the body's very important. I was waking up, I've never been back to my psychiatrist's office, and I stopped taking my medication that I'd taken since I was 17, actually the same day I walked out of his office. And I've never taken medication again. And I've never had panic or anxiety or been sick again since that day. Also, along with that, my home in 2011, I had bought my home, paid for it, and have had no mortgage since 2011. And I'd been married. I left home in 2017, and I have two girls there with my wife that I was married to when I left. We were married for 11 years, and we weren't happy. And I was not listening to my intuition and my own feelings and emotions, and staying in a situation where I wasn't happy. There was no communication. I was staying there for my kids. And one of the things when I was working inside with myself and trying to find my truths and sift through all the baggage and emotions that were kind of crazy with me, is I realized that, hey, I need to do something about this. So I knew I needed to leave. I had tried communicating 2 years prior when all the sickness and things were going on with me. And there was it completely tore us apart when I got sick. There was no emotional support on my side. So most times I was completely alone through it. And that at the same time as me waking up opened my eyes that, this is probably not the person for me. So I ended up making the decision that I needed to leave, and I knew I needed to do it, the least abrasive way as possible, kind of like tearing off a bandage. So essentially one evening I told my wife at the time, hey, I'm leaving and I'm not coming back. And I loaded my vehicle with clothes, and I haven't been back, but I left the home to her and the kids because I didn't want to disrupt their lives any more than I had to. And since, the day I left there, I've just been continuing on my spiritual journey and finding myself and being conscious and mindful of who I am, and kind of working to get rid of the chattering mind that, a lot of times can fuel anxiety and panic. So that's pretty much, where I am now. I've been through a couple things as far as like the physical sicknesses and illnesses from the panic and anxiety. At the time it was a very, very dark time, and I had no idea that it was just a growth period for me. So looking back now, from my perspective now, it's one of the most beautiful, amazing things I've ever experienced. So it initiated a lot of change to get me to, where I am now, which I'm happy to be with on this journey. I don't think it ever stops. I'm aware now, but I'm happy to be here and, conscious of it at this point. That's for sure. And I've also had some things happen after that where, I had a nice new truck, and obviously my home was paid for at some point. So I started going through a transition where I was losing my identity that I had created based on my ego, and like my truck was gone, my house was gone. I had lived by myself since I was 17, late 17, and I found myself like in a spare bedroom at my dad's house at one point. I realized that a lot of the friends I had were based on this identity of ego. So since I didn't have the interest that they were interested in or hobbies to keep pursuing, a lot of those friendships just kind of washed away as well. So at one point I ended up finding myself like completely alone. And I was very depressed actually when all that happened, like when the ego was getting washed away. Like it was pretty rough. So I forced myself like 3 months. I consider it the dark night of my soul for sure. And there was no escape to basically the depression that I was giving myself through my thoughts. There was no escaping it. I couldn't escape it at work, movies or anything like that. And I stopped watching TV and all that stuff like when I left home. So I don't watch TV or anything like that for an escape. So for a good 3 months, I just kind of sat in this bed other than work and just confronted everything that was coming at me, and all like my shadows, things inside myself that I'd kind of pushed aside for so long that really, like, they made me very uncomfortable when I had to confront them, going through that process. But I did, and I like, it was bad. I was very, very depressed, but also the same thing for that now. At this point, it's one of the most beautiful gifts of self-growth I've ever experienced. And I know now, going through that, I don't think I could ever be depressed over it again, because I realize now that it's not a good or bad, it's an ebb and flow of life, and it's a balance, and it's an opportunity for me to learn and grow. For me, I don't think we learn and grow when we're in the highs and the happies. We just kind of exist there, and maybe we do a little bit, but it's through the pain and the darkness where we have to search for the light to find it, that we experience the most growth. So that's pretty much where I am now, just ebbing and flowing and learning to be mindful the best I can.
Yeah, exactly. And I can relate. I didn't have like a dark night of the soul, but what I did have is I definitely had the ups and downs. And you're right in that when you're down, that's where you're kind of working on yourself, your shadow. You might have to confront some things, in your case, materialistic, the nice truck was gone. But you definitely, I can relate to that for sure. And isolating yourself, right? Like a lot of times, I think after a spiritual awakening, at least this is what happened with me, was you become a little bit more of an empath. If you weren't an empath before, you definitely, I think, become one. And if you were an empath before, it's stronger. Like, it's everybody's energy really affected me. So I had to isolate myself for a while and really work on that. So I can definitely relate to that. Definitely.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you said. The isolation, like I alienated myself, and it's and the empath thing too, like feeling others. It definitely, I've noticed the more I become in tune with myself, the more I become in tune with others.
That's right.
And the more I silence my mind, really, the more I can feel another person. So it's definitely crazy. And I've noticed also that it seems to be that happens to a lot of people on their spiritual journey, which is interesting to me, but I guess it's just the way it is,
It's just the way, yeah.
Right.
So tell me more about, so you had 3 months where you were sort of isolating yourself, you were in your room, you were working on your shadow, doing some shadow work. Um, how did you, or share with us how you got out of that? Like, I'm just trying to think if there's a listener that's listening or watching, and they're in that point, they're in that
Mhm.
low point. What did you do to get yourself out of that 3 month dark soul of the night?
So for me, one of the first things I had to do was come to an understanding and kind of retrain my inner dialogue to myself first off, because when I was when I was acknowledging traits of my own self that I was displaying outward into the world, I didn't like them. I didn't like what I saw, because through my awakening, I became conscious of why I was doing these things. Where when I was, asleep, I had no idea. So when I became aware of what I was doing and why I was doing them, I noticed my inner dialogue. I was being very hard on myself, judgmental towards myself, and not realizing that I didn't mean harm then. I just didn't have the knowledge or the wisdom to know what I was doing. So, first thing I had to do was retrain the way I spoke to myself inside, to be more understanding with myself and kind of be gentle with myself. Once I did that, then I could sit with myself. And what I would do, one of the other first things I would do is, like, during day-to-day interaction at work, or with my mom or my dad, I would reflect on how I acted at work with coworkers and things like that, and I would reflect on how the words I said, the actions I took, the emotions I felt, the feelings I felt, and then I would associate them with the way I would feel in the past with different circumstances and things I did, and kind of shed light on the patterns that I was exhibiting and doing these things. And when I got to the point where I could be gentle on myself, I could acknowledge them and essentially speak to myself about them through inner dialogue, and kind of come to an understanding and realize that, hey, you didn't mean to do this, and let it go, and then work on being mindful at the same time to change, you know, change the way I perceived things that could have been through subconscious traumas, tucked away from my past, to change the way I reacted to them, or to not react to them at all. So I learned to be nice to myself, and then I learned to figure out exactly what I was doing as far as my behavior towards others, and I would communicate with myself why or what traumas could be in the past and how I felt. And then once I got to the root of it, I would let it go, and move on to something else. Of course, there are times where I do feel that same thing again, but if it comes up, I'm conscious of it being there, and I'm conscious of why it's there. So if I feel it again, maybe I didn't catch it all the way at the depth of its roots. So I'll go back inward again when I get home, or when I sit in silence of mind and kind of feel the feeling that I was feeling when I was acting a certain way, and kind of get to the bottom of it that way. Um,
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great.
yeah,
So,
thank
so
you.
a few things that you mentioned, I just want to reiterate it for the
Hmm.
listeners. Is self-love is, I think, the root of a lot of challenges that we experience, right? So, I think when we talk to people, that seems to be the one missing link, that we don't love ourselves, and it takes work to be reflective. And I was reading a book, I think it was I think last year, uh, Louise Hay, and I forget the title. It was called something like How to Heal Your Body or something. And one of the things that she suggests for self-love is to look at yourself in the mirror every morning and tell yourself, like, look in your eyes and tell yourself that you love and approve of yourself. And it's interesting how difficult that was, even for me. Like, we always think I love myself. I'm happy. But looking in that mirror and saying that to yourself, that you love and approve yourself, it was challenging at first. And I think we all have that challenge that, you know, we have to love ourselves. That's the root. And when we love ourselves, then we love other people. And so, yeah, give that a shot. If you haven't done mirror work, it's pretty interesting. It's
It
pretty interesting.
sounds very interesting. I've never done exactly that, but I do think you're exactly right. I think
Yeah.
the self-love thing, I think a lot of people lack it, sadly. And I think it's something that we have to work on. And it's not easy.
No, no,
It's
not at all.
it's not easy at all, and it's
Mhm.
not something that you have to consciously work on it. It's not, once you're aware of it, it just kind of rolls around into you. To me anyway, it wasn't like that. It's you have to consciously, or I had to consciously work on becoming, or having love for myself, because I realized I didn't. And I was judging, and I
Mhm.
was stereotyping, and I was projecting, and I was and another thing too is, like, with that is, if you're not living in a place of self-love, in my opinion, just about everyone in your life, if not everyone, is a reflection of yourself.
Exactly, exactly.
So I'd find myself in these places with people or just situations that were repetitive, and they were just happening over and over again. And I realize now that all these interactions with these people, they're a reflection of myself, and they give me an opportunity to see myself and work on myself, and then move to the next point of personal growth. And I think we always find things inside that we need to work on. So I find myself now not as stuck in the looped patterns that I was before, and getting to, learn and grow, and then kind of clear space, and then move on, and kind of just keep flowing through life that way. But it definitely started for me with discovering love for myself, and
Yeah, that's
being able to have that love for myself,
yeah,
because without that, I wasn't able to, without self love for me, I was not able to communicate I wasn't able to communicate. For me, communication, like, you have to be able to exit your own feelings and emotions. You can't be triggered emotionally to be able to hear someone or feel them. If I'm feeling myself through an emotional trigger, to me, how can I be a space to feel someone else?
yeah,
So
exactly, exactly. And
yeah.
that was the other thing I thought you said was really good, and I did it myself as well. Is, when you're interacting with people and you find yourself, frustrated or angry or disappointed or sad or whatever that emotion is, asking why. Why do you feel that way? What is it within yourself that's creating this emotion? Because everything is a reflection of how you feel. And reflecting on that, taking time. And I think the more you do it, I'm a big journaler, so I journal a lot. I journal my feelings, and did a lot of work on what triggers me. And um, and then memories come back of your past, and you're like, well, that makes total sense. You start to see patterns, and then you can work on those things, and really control your reaction to things. Like you said, you're evaluating, um, you're asking why, and then you're changing how you react to things. And it's amazing when you spend time just thinking about those things, and how much we fall asleep to how we react to certain things, right?
Yes,
And
and it's
yeah,
it's interesting, right? How, like, when we're going through things like that, for me, events and traumas like in my childhood that I have not had a thought of since I was that child going through that, just flow. It's like, where did that come from? And then
exactly.
it clicks, like, well, it makes complete sense though, and it's just interesting how such, I want to say, simple things, but really they're not, because they mold who we are and how we
Exactly.
treat ourselves. But, like, it's just amazing how something that seems logically, I guess it could seem like such a small thing, and or such, just, you wouldn't think it'd be as impactful as it is in the way we treat others and ourselves, but it
That's
is, and
right.
it's remarkable.
That's right. That's right. And especially, like, just going by what you said, like, you think back and you think of a memory of when you were like 7 years old and it's nothing big. Like it, as an adult, you're like, well, that shouldn't have really affected me. But it could be as simple as somebody making fun of a shirt you're wearing,
Hmm.
that, you don't think that's going to really affect you that much, but it does. It does. It's crazy. It's crazy.
It,
So, what would be a typical day in your life today? So, we talked about how, obviously, spiritual growth. It's an ebb and flow. It's a journey. And so, if somebody was to take a camera and sort of watch your day today, where you are today, what would we see?
so in the mornings, I get up early. I get up about 5:30, and I'll lay in bed for about 10 minutes and just kind of breathe before I even move. Um, just to kind of center, I guess meditation, I guess. For me, I just track breathing. I'm really label. But and then I get up and get ready for work. And I through the day when I'm at work, I'm essentially inside reflecting almost all day. I've done the same job for a long time, so I just kind of flow with what I'm doing, and I'm inside reflecting on my actions and or anything that's going on around me and how I feel about it, or the words I'm saying to people I work with and things like that. I kind of stay inside. If things come up and I feel emotions or stuff like that, I'll kind of acknowledge it and then get, I can only get so deep with myself at work, but I kind of stay in a constant reflective state of myself. So after work, I'll come home and usually make dinner. I'm vegan, so um, I like vegetables. So I'll run to the grocery store and kind of take care of myself. And it feels good, to me, it's showing love for myself. So a lot of times I'll go to the grocery store multiple times a week and kind of pick out what I want for that night and then come home and cook and eat. And, when I eat healthy like that, I again feel happy about myself and love for myself. And I write. I don't write every day. If I'm not actually writing on paper, I'm kind of writing in my mind and going through things like that, or creating. I guess really creating. I'm creating in some type of way. For me, that is a way for me to just kind of flow myself and my feelings without the use of the analytical mind. Sometimes I paint. That's the same thing. I do things to consciously to try to let my inner child just be and show itself and not worry about the adult me using my thought processes to be like, oh, this is that or that is this. Just let them come out and play. And to me, that's a big thing to as far as being healthy with myself. Um, that's pretty much my day to day. For me, I can I don't like getting wrapped up in life and the thoughts of life or the future or past or feeling the future and past. I work to stay in the moment and know that if something happens during work or if something happens in my life during a particular day, and it say most people would see it as a bad thing, like this is bad, that's not good. I try to see it as that's there's so many other perceptions of it that I could see other than bad. And for me, it's more it's divine timing. It's the way it's supposed to be, and there's truth to it, and there's a reason to it, and it's not coincidentally happening. So I'll you know accept it and not dwell on the feeling or the thoughts of, hey, this is bad at all. I'll kind of see it for what it is, and hey, it's here, and then life moves on. I'm here and breathing now, and be happy for that.
Yeah.
Um, that's pretty much it.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I try not to think of good or bad. It's sort of a dualistic thinking, right? Something is just is. It just is. And so, what are we going to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
It's yeah. So very nice, very nice. So, what's the future? I know you're on Instagram, and so we'll share it with people where they can find you if they want to follow your story.
I'm on Instagram at Rise to Divinity. And then my girlfriend and I are also working on a business called Awaken Connect, and it's going to be a closed social group to make spiritual space for people in their own healing process and journey. Um, we're in the website is built and we'll be launching before long, and that, for me, my future entails helping other people through their spiritual awakening and to connect with themselves, because I'm sure you're aware, like, a lot of people want a lot of things. A lot of people want a relationship or a job or things like that in the physical world. And if you're lost inside yourself, it's hard to obtain any of those things, you know.
Mhm.
And of course, some of our wants are healthy and some are not. But we also live in a human world with human experiences, and it requires money to live. So some of the things that we want, kind of, you know, or need to have, I guess, to survive and eat. So I try to help people connect with themselves, um, to to maybe, like, if it's work, to try to do something to obtain the time or the satisfaction to be able to pursue themselves, or just really help people live their own truths, connect with
Right,
themselves inside to live their own truths on the
right.
outside. um, I run a couple meetup groups in Tampa for speaking a lot about metaphysics, and I don't go too deep there. Just kind of an open space for like-minded people to come talk about consciousness and things like that. So I kind of keep myself in that realm of existence. I rarely leave it anymore. It interests me a lot, and I like learning and growing. So that's pretty much where I am now.
No, that's very good. And I'll link your Instagram handle, and so that way people can follow you, and yeah, look forward to connecting with you more on social media, and watch your story continuing through the ebbs and flows. And thank you so much for sharing. I know you bring a vulnerability to your story, which I know is hard for people. It's very hard for people to share. And I think you have a great story. So thank you so much.
I appreciate it very much. I love being here. Thank you for sharing my page, of course. And I'll anytime you want to speak or things like that, I'd be more than happy to be here.
Yeah, no, sounds great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You have a good afternoon.
You too.
Thanks.